Alrighty, everybody. We're in the studio with Associate Professor Julie Choi here to talk about some big, weighty concepts: language, identity, and symbolic power. Now, these concepts are deeply connected, but they are also incredibly rich in how they bring people together, but also control others. And I guess, Julie, how can I, what's a good starting point for me to be thinking about these concepts?
Well, the reason why I wanted to kind of bring these concepts together was because, first of all, if we're thinking about language and literacy teaching and teachers, then we have a duty to obviously understand our profession and the technical language that we need to know. So that's where I was thinking about like language knowledge. And this is more foundational learning for teachers. But also it's not just about what language is or, what people say, but what does language do in the world? And so that symbolic aspect, I learned in my own journey how important that was and life-changing that was. And I think it is going to be life-changing for everybody in any generation because that is how language works. We know we have the tools, like we know the words or the grammar, but we don't just spit out words. When we do those things, they relate to something else and they do something else in the world. So I wanted to bring those ideas together, and I was hoping that in doing this, like how can you understand it, or anybody who's kind of new to it, is to start thinking about, don't think about it so much as all these abstract concepts that's very difficult, but maybe to think about it with the everyday. So the episodes that we have, been talking about, we've been trying to look for lots of everyday things, but also linking them in a real conversation just like this. We don't have like something hugely fancy here. We need to see how we can make these connections between these more abstract concepts to everyday life. So maybe we could do a taster for this, first episode, right? And one of the things I thought we might start with is just like acronyms, because you're in a school. I'm in TESOL. We're full of acronyms. And one of the ones that I thought we could both talk about is the acronym of like EAL, or sometimes we have EAL/D. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, we had the term ESL, English as a second language. I think that might have been the same in Australia.
Yeah.
And these days in the United States, they'll use the term ELL, so English language learners. Here we use EAL. And one of the reasons for that, I suppose, is, and there might be actually lots of reasons, but in the day and age that we live in now, it doesn't quite make sense to call something like English, which is a global language or an international language, to think about that as a second or third or fourth language. Like, what does that mean for multilinguals or bilinguals who are growing up with many languages? It seems to me that English is kind of positioned now. I mean, I know there's a lot of people in the world who don't speak English, but actually there's a lot of people in the world who do speak English. But then we could also ask questions about which English. We could also ask questions about what does it mean to speak English? And English for what? So, if you go to universities, you have like English for academic purposes, in EAP. You have English for specific purposes, in ESP.
Isn't there ERP now?
No, there's ERP.
English for romantic purposes.
That's right, exactly. It hasn't taken off quite yet, but while I was living in Japan, there was such a thing, and I thought, wow, this is like English is just... It's just crazy, there's going to be no end to this. But English has a certain kind of power in the world, and young people need to learn it. And schools, policies, governments, everybody has adopted into this thing, right? So I was reading an article in The Conversation that I think I pointed out here.
Yeah.
This was some time ago, though, but I thought, oh, this is kind of interesting. Yeah, that 6 ways Australia's education system is failing our kids. And one of the items was Australian education is monolingual. Yeah, and I thought that like use of the monolingual was like, okay. So like I'm living in a place, because I used to live in Sydney and now in Melbourne, and I've always thought about these places like super diverse, like multilinguals, multiculturalism. It's just like that is what Australia is. But then, what do they mean by monolingual? Yeah, okay. So policies, assessments, instruction. And these days, with funding cuts, the first thing to go is really languages. Okay, so how, like the whole world is learning English, right? Or can speak English to whatever degree or whichever kind of English, can do things in English. And then Australian students are only actually banking on just the English and not anything else. So that then, the tables are turned or flipped, or, it makes us think about a lot of things. Like, are we really preparing them for the kind of world that they have to go out to? And I think it's in this article that they mentioned that English is like increasingly just becoming a basic language. I thought that was an interesting thing too. I mean, yes, because a lot of like children who have education now, are accessing English. But that also means that there's a lot of those in, I don't know, rural, regional, third world countries, wherever, where maybe, English is not a basic language. So that's a disadvantage. That's a way of thinking about English as a disadvantage too, right? So for certain people. So, all these terminologies are things that we don't really think about. Like English is, of course, it's important. Why, you don't speak English? Like, why don't you speak English? And we could be in we could be in Korea or Vietnam. We're like, why don't you speak English? Like, because we're in Korea and Vietnam, but that's just how powerful English has become, right? So I thought that just even starting out here and thinking through these acronyms gives us some way into thinking about concepts like discourse communities that we would like people to understand, right? So that our field is a discourse community, with its own vocabulary, and changing the vocabulary changes the community, how the community thinks. So I think it's in your generation when you've come into, start studying with us. We did use the terms EAL, but I think we also use some other terms too. What do you think? How do we call EAL learners? Do you remember?
Like multilingual learners, emergent multilingual learners. I think those are the main two.
So do you guys use that in schools at all?
No, definitely not. No. And in schools, when I was in high school, it was ESL, and that would always indicate withdrawal automatically. Like if you're in an ESL program, you'd be withdrawn from class for an hour a week for 3 sessions to work on your English. That was how it was framed. And it wasn't until I was actually in TESOL in 2018 that terminology really changed in curriculum documentations, and it became EALD. And then over time, even the /D, the /dialect, has also dropped off as well from a lot of policy that I've encountered, possibly at a school-based level, not necessarily at a government level. But that terminology is still, I would say, dominant, whereas the emergent multilinguals and also multilingual learners almost feels, and I think we've had conversations about this, like it feels synonymous to still being an EALD learner. Yeah. Which is really sad.
I mean, so on the one hand, we kind of problematize English, that if English is part of everybody's repertoire, then, having English as a second or third or whatever is problematic. But the second, third, and all this is problematic too with kids who are growing up with, so many. So turning it into English as an additional language probably doesn't do huge amount of work, as you just pointed out. But also how far we've come in now thinking about multilingual learners, which probably is a better thing. It takes away the English, takes away the second, and so on. But it still, I think, begs the question about what do you even mean by language then? Okay, so then that's a more interesting question to me, I think, because it's like if you're just thinking about the compartmentalization of languages, like this is English, this is French, this is Spanish, this is the first, this is the second, third. Okay, so we're counting, put them in boxes. If that's the meaning of the multilingual, then I think we don't do that much work going out of the things that we were problematizing. But if we now want to ask the question, okay, so what does it mean by multi? And what does it mean by language? Yeah, how do you understand language? Is language just about these words? These words here and like the written symbols? Or does all of that also mean is part of language? Or if that's all part of language, do we need a different word for language? Because language needs to be maybe this thing, and then this other thing is then multimodal or semiotic resources. Like there's a lot of questions to be asked here. But when you switch a term like this, if you don't have that conversation about what you mean by that thing, you might be just reproducing the old thing.
And this is what Claire Cramsh talks about when it comes to symbolic power.
Correct.
The ways in which power shapes, it shifts, it impacts people's lives. It decides who is in, who's included, who is excluded,
That's right.
how people are treated. And I think that's something that I really became a lot more conscious of in our conversations and through your teaching, in realizing these are not neutral labels by any means.
Yeah. And I mean, language in itself is not apolitical. It is very political. And the other thing is that it has the effects. The consequences are on the learners, so you're positioning them in certain ways. And that's where the connection of language and identity become really important. And so in trying to talk about the technical, how can I talk about the technical without talking about the person who has produced this language, the people who are interacting and the things that they're trying to communicate and do? That seems to me that there's always going to be power and various things involved. And thus, the idea of language and identity has to be upfront, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation all the way upfront in episode 1. And that, you can use language in lots of ways. You can use it to connect, but you can also use it to control. And if you're not aware of such things and you don't have the concepts and tools to look at that kind of thing, then you won't be able to see how you are being positioned or how you want to be positioned or how you are trying to position yourself and not succeeding or succeeding. Like, language is not neutral. And we need to learn about these things. And if it is that we don't teach it in schools, then what is the alternative? Okay, we teach it here, right? So this is the reason why I wanted to bring this. This is just what I'm saying. In the everyday, it's there already. But you and I, we might have not ever thought about such a thing if we didn't bring it to our own attention. So it's through the everyday that we can start to link these concepts of discourse community, language and identity, symbolic power. These are the things that we can start to use this language to explain what's actually happening in the world that's quite hidden, but is there and has consequences for our learners.